Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special presentation of CBC Saskatchewan News. I'm Brian Enius. In 2015, the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was released. In it, there were 94 calls to action to right the wrongs of what it called the cultural genocide of residential schools. One of those calls to action prompted the government to declare the September 30th as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. But it's only one day of the year. Here in Saskatchewan, we wanted to find other real-life examples of the calls to action taking place. So we start in Saskatoon, where knowledge keeper Judy Pelly works on reconciliation year-round. It's her full-time job. The residential school survivor counsels the vulnerable and the powerful on hope and healing. Bonnie Allen brings us her story.
As long as you're holding the feather, that nobody interfere, don't ask any questions. So a little bit about myself,
Every week, 69-year-old Judy Pelly bears her soul in a talking circle at the Elizabeth Fry Society.
My father was an alcoholic, and so was my mother.
It's a safe space for women who need it. They've spent time in jail and struggled with abuse, addiction, or domestic violence.
I was beaten to a pulp, or sometimes you couldn't even recognize who I was.
For Pelly, raw honesty is the only path to healing.
When I was sexually abused by the time I was age 7 years old.
That abuse happened during her 6 years at a residential school. She started drinking at the age of 13 and didn't stop for decades.
I drank. I was a broken person.
But no more. She now spreads a message of hope.
I'll never be ashamed of where I came from. I came from poverty. I came from abuse. I came from domestic violence. I was a drunk. I was all these things. But you know what? I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm an Anishinaabe, and I'll never be ashamed of that.
6 years ago, Pelly began leading talking circles in Saskatoon several times a week, helping those on drugs, on the streets, in gangs, or caught up in sex trafficking rings. And now she also advises some of the most powerful organizations and institutions in the city.
I usually like to go by a cultural advisor or knowledge keeper. People use elder, and I don't feel like I quite fit that yet. I don't think I'm wise enough.
Most would respectfully disagree. The former teacher and college dean advises 30 groups in total, including the University of Saskatchewan, the Health Authority, Saskatoon City Hall, and Police Service.
I'm getting calls every single day almost to do new things. I can't keep up.
Hi, Judy. How are you doing?
Deputy Police Chief Randy Huseman sits on the Chief's Indigenous Advisory Committee with Pelly.
You know, true healing begins when we start to talk to one another.
We learn, we change, we grow. And I've seen this police service crawl out from the real dark times and the struggles with relationships that we've had with the Indigenous culture. And I'll tell you that we've come a long way.
Pelly does many things, but right now her focus is helping groups figure out how to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action.
We need one another. We can't do this alone.
There's a lot of pressure on these institutions, universities, hospitals, police services, to fix or get rid of systemic racism, and they call you. Do you ever worry that it's more public relations than anything?
It is. It very much is. And you know, some people say like it's just tokenism, and the elders are starting to say, you know what, no more lip service, no more baby steps.
She hopes this is a wake-up call, the confirmation this summer of unidentified remains near residential schools.
I look at Judy as part of this organization.
RCMP Superintendent Honey Dwyer says she asked Pelly for advice on how officers should respond.
How should they approach when they're confronted with being told that we're responsible for the residential schools, for children being pulled away?
So Pelly recorded a video for RCMP officers across Canada. Her advice? Acknowledge, apologize, listen.
It just opened our members' eyes that, yes, we do have a part. We have to acknowledge the past, and how do we move forward on that, and hear what happened and offer an apology.
So every time you do these talks and you share your story, you revisit that trauma.
Yeah.
What toll does that take on you?
Doesn't. It builds me up. Every single morning I wake up with gratitude. Every single morning I thank the Creator. And every single night I go to bed and I say, did I do the right thing or did I do the best I could? This is not book learning. This is real life experience.
She chooses to try to make change within herself, within institutions, and within these circles.
Don't let your past define you.
Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Saskatoon.
In 2022, the Back to Batoche Festival celebrated a milestone. It marked half a century of gathering, and there was a big announcement that made the celebration even more special for those in attendance. Kendall Latimer has more.
Hundreds of people burst into applause as the federal government announced it was giving land back to Métis people, signing the deal for 690 hectares of land at Batoche National Historical Site that's being transferred to Métis Nation Saskatchewan. It's a massive milestone for Métis people who have long fought for the rights to self-governance, self-determination, and land.
It's been a long journey, a short one in the span that we accomplished what we accomplished today. So it's been really aggressive conversations around land, and the government has been very cooperating.
The land at Batoche is rich with history, known as the heart of Métis Nation. It was the site of the 1885 Battle of Batoche, the final battle of the Northwest Resistance, the Métis people against armed Canadian forces.
A lot of my ancestors, Joe Vandal, Baptiste Vandal, Pierre Vandal, they were from St. Boniface, but they fought at Batoche. They were part of that historical resistance and against the Canadian government.
Now, as a federal government minister, Vandal says the government's position has changed tremendously.
We now realize that there's a great opportunity to make amends, to move forward in partnership. This is reconciliation.
Parks Canada will continue to maintain the land in collaboration with Métis Nation Saskatchewan. There are already plans underway for what's to come.
We're planning together in regards to what we can build on it. As a matter of fact, the land you're standing on, there'll be a youth center being built here with cooperation with the federal government.
He says he's looking forward to working with the federal government in the future. Kendall Latimer, CBC News, Batoche.
The University of Regina received a special presentation in the spring of 2022. Knowledge keeper Wayne Goodwill from Standing Buffalo Dakota Nation presented the school with a Buffalo Winter Count robe. It is a teaching and educational tool for the university, and it is a way of recording the winters and preserving the stories of warriors and tribes of the Great Plains. Goodwill is one of the last known robe painters in the province. Stay with us. We'll have more after the break. Welcome back. Dog sledding in the province has a long tradition as a mode of transportation, but its presence in southern Saskatchewan has shrunk. One Indigenous land-based educator is trying to bring it back in the southeast. Our videographer Richard Ejikate caught up with him while he was training 23 dogs for tours and teaching people in Regina about Indigenous culture.
I was about 10 or 11, a family friend of ours, she ran dogs. She brought a team of her dogs down over Christmas break when I was a kid, and just absolutely fell in love with the sport and the aspect of the traditional mentality of having working animals, and kind of taking it back to the older days when we didn't rely so much on vehicles or snowmobiles. My name is Garrick Schmidt, founder and owner, operator of Eagle Ridge Dog Sled Tours. Beginning of October, when the temperatures do finally start to cool down, we'll do what's called dry land training with the dogs. I'll hook them up similar style with the gangline, but in front of the quad. We'll start off really slow with about 2 miles at a time, about 5-6 miles an hour, just to kind of get them back in the routine of running again. And then from there, we add on more and more mileage and kind of start progressing with when it starts to snow out. We get back on the sleds, we get the mileage in, we feed the dogs, like we'll snack them throughout the day if we're putting in 40 or 50 miles in a day. It's something that not a lot of people do anymore. It gives us that opportunity to share these stories and these teachings, and to pretty much pass on the passion that I have and the workers that we have for the working dog.
Indigenous communities have always had a strong ties to the land, and through reconciliation, there's a growing public interest in the culture and history. Some communities are choosing to share that through tourism. Bonnie Allen shows us what that looks like.
In northwestern Saskatchewan, Robert McCollum knows these waters, this land, and their history.
Nice day for a canoe.
Now he's training to be a certified guide for tourists. His home community of Waterhen Lake Cree Nation just purchased this eco-lodge inside Meadow Lake Provincial Park.
Being able to let other people see how you live, and maybe be able to even teach them something.
Indigenous tourism is growing. Eco-Lodge manager Jesse Morin has big plans to sell packages with trapping, fishing, canoeing, even sleeping in teepee lodges like this to be erected soon.
People are looking for something authentic. When you leave this place, you get to witness the wilderness of the boreal forest, but you also get a better understanding of who we are as people.
A recent survey of North American and European tourists found there is an appetite for Indigenous-led tourism, but only if it does not exploit the community and it does provide an authentic cultural experience. The problem, what one considers authentic is often based on stereotypes.
We're not the Peter Pan type style Indians, right? That image isn't who we are, but there are elements of our culture that we want to showcase, right? Our dancing.
What's authentic is evolving, says this tourism coordinator. An Indigenous tourism corridor around Saskatoon includes a casino and golf resort, a heritage park with bison, and now these glamping teepee lodges. And soon, guided tours explaining the history of residential schools.
So it's really, really dark truths that we are going to showcase and tell those stories. In spite of all of that, look at who we are now.
As for Robert McCollum, what he's offering is simple. A chance to connect with him and nature. Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Greg Lake, Saskatchewan.
The First Nations University of Canada in Regina is approaching the research of medicinal plants in a unique way. It's pairing students with elders and knowledge keepers who know these traditional plants intimately. Laura Sharpaletti brings us the story.
This is Elder Archie Weenie at his sweat lodge near Regina. CBC visited him to talk about his work with students at the First Nations University of Canada. But before our conversation could start, he performed a traditional smudging ceremony. These are the types of protocols that students in the Department of Indigenous Knowledge and Science are taught to respect when asking elders to share their knowledge about traditional plants.
Say if I talked about something so powerful, everybody will try and grab it, misuse it. So old people are careful what they reveal.
Student Ana Kuriemi Arellano Franco has consulted with Elder Weenie for her research. Due to the pandemic, she has been working remotely from her home in Mexico. She says medicinal plants are important to her because of her own Indigenous ancestry.
This knowledge has been passed through generations. It came to my grandmother, to my mother, and now I am interested in.
Arellano Franco identified, extracted, and analyzed the medicinal properties of 7 common plant species, including wild sarsaparilla, Canadian mint, prairie rose, and purple coneflower.
Purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea, has been used to treat throat infections, and it's been researched for the same purposes.
First Nations professor Dr. Vincent Ziffel says what sets this research apart from other research is that special care is taken to respect and not exploit Indigenous knowledge.
One very important factor here is relationship building, and our work cannot proceed before we have an opportunity to work with elders. So one thing that's really important to me anyway is to return that knowledge to communities, to share that information with elders, to properly credit Indigenous knowledge holders.
And when there is a relationship and respect, Elder Weenie enjoys passing on his knowledge to students.
If it's going to help an individual, providing they're sincere about it, I will share it.
Ziffel says working with Indigenous knowledge keepers has also affected the way he teaches. It's instilled a love of storytelling. Laura Sharpaletti, CBC News, Regina.
Thanks for staying with us. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action are intended to acknowledge the horrors of the past and to provide a path to healing. 5 calls to action are specifically about reducing barriers to sports for Indigenous athletes. In 2021, the OKC Buffalo finished up their first year of 6-person football with a game against Regina's Sheldon Williams Spartans in the first Unity Bowl at Leibel Field. The Buffaloes are made up of high school players from the Ochapways, Kakahestewa, and Cowessess First Nations. For the players and their coaches, that season was one of growth.
We'll support each other and come and play. It's pretty fun.
To Sean Valley. I play for OKC Buffaloes.
My name is Xander. I play for OKC Buffaloes.
So all the boys that were here today, this was all their first year of playing football. When I came to the school last year, I kind of had an idea of combining the 3 neighboring First Nation communities and talked to the chiefs about it, and they were really supportive, and then we just kind of worked with the schools and principals and got all the paperwork done with the High School Athletic Association.
First practice was fun. Football is new to me, and it's just a good learning experience. I didn't really have football in grade 10, 9, or 11, so this is the first year that I really heard about football.
It was pretty good. Well, I kind of played with my cousin a little bit. Like, we used to just catch the ball when I was little, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. Well, pretty easy, but at the same time, it's hard.
My son Marcus is an assistant coach with Sheldon Williams, and he's a really good young coach. He came out to watch our Truth and Reconciliation game on September 30th, and he came up with this idea. He just thought, Sheldon had a bye this week, and we would be at the end of our season, and he just thought this would be kind of a really cool thing. And so he did all the legwork. He sold it to his coaching staff, and he sold it to me.
It's a good bonding experience, meet new people around the community.
I gotta say, working as a team, it kind of got easy building up because you got confidence in each other.
I was very proud of them and proud of the way they came out and played today. It was a lot of fun to watch.
A Saskatoon-based nonprofit is working to reduce the barriers to sport one step at a time. Prairie Run Crew is handing out shoes and a positive message. We caught up with Terrence Crosschild sharing his message of hope while he was at Ochapways First Nation. Kelly Provo has this story.
Good job, don't pass me. Good job, you guys.
Terrence Crosschild believes this running clinic could be the starting line for hope and restoration for these kids. Running helped get him back on track. Crosschild won the Saskatchewan Marathon in 1998, but then stopped running because of his addiction to alcohol and gambling. After an attempted suicide 7 years ago, he started putting one foot in front of another again. At first, he couldn't make it around a city block. After a year, he completed a marathon.
And if I can share my story with other people from communities like Ochapways here today, I can be able to bring a message of hope to say, you know what, you can do this.
Crosschild is part of a member tribe of the Blackfoot Confederacy in southern Alberta. He says before they had horses, Blackfoot messengers would run messages all over what is now Western Canada.
And I really believe by us doing this with community partners, we are restoring our ways of being able to run, to be able to be messengers, to be able to share our stories through sport and our own stories, what we have gone through to get to that sport.
You know, be able to have running shoes, be able to have that gift, just like when I shared my Fast Blue shoes when I was young.
Crosschild's nonprofit, Prairie Run Crew, doesn't just teach kids how to run, he also gets them new running shoes. The footwear comes from partnerships with New Balance Canada and the Brain Sport Running Specialty Store in Saskatoon.
But here's a pair of runners, you have that access, that accessibility to sport, to be able to do something. They restore their health, their mental health as well. They start feeling good about themselves.
TRC call number 89 specifically addresses reducing barriers to sports participation for Indigenous peoples. Crosschild says shoes and running skills help send kids down the right path.
Because we know if we can have one athlete that goes home, they encourage their family, then that family then in turn go out into the community to literally transform an entire community. One athlete, one youth at a time. Look at those fast feet.
For CBC News, I'm Kelly Provo in Saskatoon.
6, yeah.
An Inuit musician has found his voice. It's an improvisation of traditional throat singing and beatboxing, something he calls throat boxing. Our videographer Richard Edgecate was there when he took to the stage for an incredible performance alongside the Regina Symphony Orchestra.
When I first started, I was really shy because throat singing is something that the female does primarily. So I grabbed onto that and I made it my own. I didn't plan on being a throat boxer. I wanted to be a guitarist, but I gave it a shot on stage, and that's when I decided I should include some of who I am and where I come from into what I do. And that's how throat boxing really came to be.
We had a pretty special evening tonight. This program is one of our regular classics concerts here at Connexus Arts Centre, but it's all focused on different aspects of dance music for orchestra, and sort of the big centerpiece is this piece called Atazocan, which has been quite a tremendous pleasure to put together, sort of a multimedia event.
So much of this show was about trying to figure out how can Indigenous dance interface with an orchestra. First it was about getting the score, and it was about building orchestration and musical language around the singers. We have Nelson Taguna, who is a throat singer, beatboxer together, or throat boxer. So a lot of it was me doing back and forth with Nelson to kind of get a sense of his rhythm and his language.
Music has a role in binding us together. And so the RSO's job, my job as head of the RSO, is to try and participate in our community and to make this a richer and hopefully a happier place for everybody to live.
It's very important for Indigenous peoples to feel included. And when I'm on stage, I feel included. The dancers, they feel included. We feel like we belong, and that's the important part.
If you want to learn more about Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, visit CBC's website called Beyond 94. It's a website that monitors progress on Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, and it's continually updated. This has been a special presentation of CBC Saskatchewan News. I'm Brian Enius. Thank you for sharing your time with us.